This story comes from a missing persons case that was never solved and quietly archived by local authorities. It took place in the United States, in a suburban neighborhood where houses were close together and nothing ever felt out of place. In 2019, a college student named Andrew rented a small basement room beneath a family home to save money. The space was simple: a bed, a desk, and a single narrow window near the ceiling that barely let light in. The homeowners were quiet, polite, and rarely seen. For the first few weeks, Andrew slept without issues. Then one night, just as he was drifting off, he felt the bed shift slightly. Not enough to wake him fully, just enough to make his body tense. A few seconds later, he heard a sound from inside the walls. It wasn't knocking. It wasn't pipes. It sounded like fingernails slowly dragging across wood, stopping whenever he moved. Andrew convinced himself it was the house settling. The next night, the sound returned, closer this time, directly behind the wall next to his bed. Then something new happened. A quiet voice whispered his name. Not loudly. Not threatening. Just enough to be heard. Andrew sat up, heart racing, and listened. The voice stopped immediately. The room was silent again. The next morning, Andrew asked the homeowners if anyone had been in the basement at night. They looked confused and said no one ever went down there after dark. That night, Andrew locked his door. At 3:11 a.m., the whisper returned, clearer than before, coming from directly above the ceiling. It said, "Don't answer." Andrew stopped sleeping properly. He stayed awake through the nights with headphones on, afraid of the silence. When he reviewed audio from his phone, which he had left recording overnight, he found something disturbing. Between long periods of static, a second voice could be heard breathing slowly, counting under its breath. The numbers were always out of order. Andrew decided to leave for a few days, but when he packed his bag, he noticed something written on the wall above his bed. It hadn't been there before. The words were carved shallowly into the paint. They read, "You hear us now." Andrew confronted the homeowners again. This time, their expressions changed. They asked him if he had heard voices. When he said yes, the older man sighed and told him the basement used to be a fallout shelter built decades earlier. Several people had died there during an illegal experiment involving sensory deprivation. Andrew laughed it off and went back to his room, but that night, the whispering became louder. Multiple voices now. All overlapping. All saying his name. At exactly 3:11 a.m., the basement lights shut off. In complete darkness, Andrew felt the bed sink slowly, as if weight was being added from underneath. Something cold brushed against his ankle. A voice whispered directly beside his ear, "You're listening now." Andrew ran upstairs and pounded on the homeowner's door. No one answered. The house was completely empty. Furniture gone. Photos missing. As if no one had ever lived there. Andrew tried calling for help, but his phone showed no signal, even though it had full service earlier. At 3:11 a.m., his phone rang anyway. The call showed no number. When he answered, he heard his own voice on the other end, begging him not to hang up. Police were called later that morning by neighbors who heard screaming from the basement. When officers arrived, they found the basement room empty. Andrew was never found. But the house remains occupied. New renters move in every year. And according to police reports, each tenant files the same complaint before disappearing. Whispers in the walls, voices counting incorrectly, and a message carved above the bed that always appears overnight. It reads, "You hear us now." If you ever find yourself alone at night, listening to a house that shouldn't be speaking back, remember this story. Because some places don't want to be escaped. They want to be heard.